Great taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.
Hello, welcome to Great Taste. I'm Steve Bosch, your host. Beth Howard, so great to see you.
It's good to be back. I haven't
so
been on your
funny.
show in so long.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? I feel really weird sitting on this couch. Is kind of like, what? I feel like I need to sit up. Oh, let me see if I can do this. Okay, that's much better.
All right.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm not going to say how are you or anything like that because we just had lunch together. And it was really fun. By the way, everyone, you're listening to Great Taste, 60 Minutes of Deliciousness, and maybe you're watching it. And I hope you are because we'll be very comedic, I think. But we had wonderful lunch together. And you brought, what did you bring?
Guess. One word. It's pie.
Pie, right. And for those people who are not familiar, pie has been a part of your life for quite a few years now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
we met because of pie.
We met because of pie. Do you want to tell everyone about that?
So I met you in 2010, August of 2010. You'd invited me to be on your radio show because I had been a pie judge at the Iowa State Fair and coming back to my native Iowa after being away for 30 years. And I had just stopped at the American Gothic House in Eldon, and I found out it was for rent. And then I came to be on your radio show right after that, and I couldn't stop talking about, oh my God, the American Gothic House. What? You mean I could live there? And so instead of going back to California, I moved into the American Gothic House in Eldon, Iowa, and opened the Pitchfork Pie Stand, and the rest is history.
And that was when? What year was
2010.
that? Oh my.
Yeah, we're getting up there, Steve. Oh my God. 14 years.
Time flies by, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It's been, every time we get together, it's so much fun. The last time we were together, my wife and I were on a walk with you, and that was like, I don't know, a year ago, and so much has gone on, including, I want to talk about the last book that you did, but before we get there, I just want to give people just a little bit of perspective about what you've been putting your full attention on the last, say, year.
Yeah, it's been almost exactly a year. So, well, my last book came out December of 2022. That's World Peace, a pie baker's quest for peace, love, and understanding. No, that's not quite the subtitle, but it's something like that. Yeah, a pie baker's quest for peace, love, and understanding. So I went around the world, baked pies in 9 countries, and I finally wrote the book because I did that trip in 2015. I finally wrote the book, got it published December of 2022, and then I spent the next 6 months on a book tour promoting the heck out of that book. I was all over the country, and no sooner did the last book get signed on the tour and I was done, I said, that's it, 6 months, okay, gotta go do something else now. And I didn't know what else I was gonna do, but I just knew that it was not gonna be writing another book anytime soon. And so I went hiking in Arizona for about 3 weeks, because that's where my last tour, last stop on the book tour was in Tucson. So I stayed on, went hiking, and I'm like, just relax, the answer will come to you. And it did. Out there on the mountaintop, I'm like, you know what? It's time to make a documentary about pie. So instead of writing a book about pie, now I'm making a film about pie. And I wanted to tell you this at lunch, but I just wanted a challenge. I wanted to do something that I hadn't done before. And I'd written 5 books, 4 published. 1 is still in the drawer, but maybe someday it'll come out. And yeah, I wanted to try something else. I wanted to just learn new skills, and my goodness, this has been definitely that, a challenging learning experience. But yeah, so last May, June, started shooting, and we were all over the state of Iowa filming the pies on RAGBRAI, which is the bicycle ride across Iowa every year. It was their 50th anniversary this last year. 500 miles, and in fact, I have Scott Horsley from National Public Radio, AKA NPR is No Pie Refused. Yeah, he says on camera, it's the only 500-mile bike ride where you gain weight. Yeah, and he's a big pie eater.
I saw that was on your sizzle reel.
Yeah. So that was he's very funny. So there's the 500-mile bike ride across Iowa, which pie has become this crazy fixture on it. Like, people are obsessed with it. Then the Iowa State Fair Pie Competition, which is what brought me back to Iowa, 14 years ago, ironically. So that's in there, and interviewed a lot of different judges and pie contestants, and it's a really positive vibe there. It's like, it's not a serious competition. Well, it seems serious, but really these bakers all just like hanging out with each other. It's very sweet. And then there's all kinds of new pie shops around Iowa. So after the Pitchfork Pie Stand closed, people were sending me hate mail like, what, you're closed, where am I going to get pie? I'm like, make your own damn pie. And buy my cookbook and you can make your own pie. I'll tell you how. But no, there's lots of new pie businesses that have sprung up, and a lot of them are like these little cottage things where you place your order ahead of time and then you do a pickup at whatever designated spot, and it's kind of a nice little business model. But anyway, we've covered that and more in this documentary film, and it's still, I don't have a release date for it yet, but I'm really hoping for this summer.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to go backwards a little bit, because I know that there's some people who are watching, listening, who are saying, yeah, pie. And there are other people going, pie. What's the big deal?
Well, what is the big deal?
Well, the big deal, I think, is that it's something that you have found through what you've done is a uniting force of humanity, essentially. And when you went on this tour in 2015, that you wrote the book about world peace, you actually baked with different types of, we'll call them pie bakers, but they were doing their own particular style of baking some type of dessert item, right, in their country. Or you were making pies for that event in,
Bangkok.
In Bangkok, Thailand, for the U.S. Embassy, right? And you, I want to say, rediscovered how uniting a force pie is. So that's part of the prequel, I guess, to this documentary, because you bring all that, I'm going to say it, to the table. And I shouldn't have. Anyway, could you just give us a short look at what some of the most, I'd say, salient points were that you discovered on this tour, the things that meant a lot to you that you discovered on this tour?
Well, that's a tough question, because I went around the world with this grandiose idea of uniting people through pie and showing people, hey, America still has goodness. Like, we have a pretty bad reputation abroad, I'm afraid to say. But I thought, okay, well, let me show people. I had baked pies in other countries previous to that trip around the world. I had baked in Japan and South Africa, and it's in a township and with kids, So I had seen like the way that no matter what language people spoke or what country I was in, people loved this thing of coming together and making something with their hands. And in this case, it happened to be American style apple pie. And the joy that I saw in that was so amazing. I thought, it's really about the happiness that comes from bringing people together. It's really more building community than anything. And I thought, well, let me just go around and do that in other countries. And, I don't know what I thought would happen. Like, oh, the world's going to be perfectly fine after this. And then we had an election and things did not go the way we all expected. So yeah, it's been challenging. And I was honestly pretty depressed when I got back. So it wasn't the life-altering experience that maybe I thought it could be, or impactful. But I did have this one thing happen, not pie related, but I got very sick when I was in Greece. And it was like the one country where I didn't have somebody's house to stay in. And I had stayed with friends and other people who invited me to stay in their homes all the way around, except for this one country, Greece, which is where pie originated. That in Egypt, it goes way, way back. Pie is not American. That's the other point I like to make is, hey, pie's an immigrant too. But I got sick in Greece, so sick, and I didn't eat any pie there. I didn't make any pie there. It was so disappointing. And I was on my way back to the airport, and I dragged my 70 pounds worth of luggage because I was traveling with my rolling pin and all my pie supplies. And I got to the top of the subway stairs and I was just like about to pass out. And Greece was in the middle of this financial crisis, and the American embassy had told people don't travel there. It's really dangerous. They're mugging tourists, which was complete BS. The people were so nice. And anyway, but I'm standing at the top of the subway. This lady grabs my suitcase. I'm like, oh, great. Now I'm getting robbed. They said, don't go there. It's dangerous. And I was so weak from having been sick. And it turns out she was just helping me with my luggage, and she didn't speak any English. She carried my bag all the way down to the train, which was a really deep subway station, and made sure I got on the right train in the right direction to the airport. And it was just like, that's the one thing out of that trip that I have to say, like, that was probably the single most impactful thing that happened to me is, that there's always somebody willing to help, and even if it's a perfect stranger who doesn't speak the same language. And that's what I've taken away with me, is that I want to be that person who helps somebody with their luggage. So pie is what took me around the world, but it's just funny getting sick and being in that situation of being so weak and vulnerable, which is not like me. That was amazing.
I do remember there were other situations, though. For example, that young man in Bangkok who wanted to share with you this recipe for a particular cake.
Right, rainbow cake.
Right, rainbow
cake. Yeah, your
cake.
favorite. You love rainbows, that's right. So I was baking pies for the American Embassy's 4th of July party. And I thought it was going to be like this picnic for the families that worked at the embassy. But no, it was a elegant affair for 1,200 dignitaries of Southeast Asia. It was nuts. It was at a hotel ballroom. And so I was baking 75 pies, and they set me up in the kitchen of this Grand Hyatt hotel in the Grand Hyatt Erawan in Bangkok. And I was working with Thai pastry chefs. Mind you, French trained pastry chefs, but they were Thai. And they were like, what's this crazy American woman doing making pie dough with her hands? And, I was doing everything by hand. And then the blueberry juice was bubbling out through the top of the pie crust. And, oh, you can't serve that. It's not perfect. I'm like, yeah, it's supposed to look like this. It's supposed to look homemade. And you watch, this is going to be the first pie to get eaten. And it was. But this one chef in particular, who was the kind of managing the kitchen, and he was my contact person, he wasn't the one making it, but there was this kid in there making a rainbow cake every single day. And this was during the time when the Supreme Court had passed gay marriage was allowed, right? So everybody back in the US was celebrating with rainbows on their Facebook pages. You know how everybody changes their little profile picture and the whole page is all rainbows. And so I said, oh, are you making that for in honor of the Supreme Court law? They looked at me like, we have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, oh yeah, we're in Bangkok. That's not relevant to them. I said, no, we just serve this every day at the hotel. So anyway, and when I was leaving, they gifted me with the recipe for the rainbow cake. That was very special. Yeah, I've made it a couple times. It's not that hard. It's just a couple extra little steps with all those layers. I think it's like 7 layers or something.
So you finish the book, you get it published, you go on a 6-month tour, you're exhausted, you are in Arizona, 3 weeks of hiking, and a revelation hits you to make this movie, right? So, of course, you realize at the same time you don't know anything about making movies.
Right.
I mean, even though you were a television personality on camera person, right?
I've done a few things.
Right,
yeah.
right.
I've been around the movie making industry.
It.
Lots of friends in the industry, but I hadn't ever done anything myself. I didn't know how to create a budget or what kind of cameras, or I still don't, I'm not sure if I still know. Still don't really know. I haven't done my budget yet. I'm just still winging it, but it's been coming along. Yeah.
But what happens is you get this idea, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, I think I need to do this. This is something that's driving me, because I certainly know I can't sit around and twiddle my fingers, my thumbs, because I have to be busy. And yet you have another challenge because you have a pet who's ill. And this illness of this pet actually determines, it kind of sets the stage and the location for your future we'll say, work of in this film, right?
Well, because, back when I met you, I had already made I had done a 2-week shoot with a friend of mine.
Okay.
We went around California. It was going to be a national show. We were pitching a documentary or TV show, right?
Now.
That was 14 years ago. And it was just exploring the world of pie and all the creative things people are doing with pie, and I mean even artists and their pies, and we were able to get it sold. We came close many times, and so I had been through another round of pitching, different iteration of that same show basically, and all these guys in Hollywood just kept saying they wanted a baking competition. They didn't want like a travel log show. They didn't want anything that was so earnest, whatever. And I was so mad,
Nothing
like,
heartfelt.
I don't get it. Yeah. But didn't everybody love Ted Lasso? I'm like, this is like Ted Lasso, but with pie, And I just couldn't get anyone in Hollywood to budge. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it myself. I'll do my own film then. I'll show you. Let me just prove to you. I'm not even a little sizzle reel, but I'm going to do the whole thing myself. I was just determined because, they say, don't get mad, get busy, right? And so I thought I was going to do the whole U.S. I've been tracking pie stories around the country forever, around the world for that matter. But yes, our little Chihuahua rescue had gotten sick, and I thought, I need to do something where I'm not traveling so much, where I can be closer to home and be close to her while she's, suffering, while she's going through her. Well, we were on death watch, it was so sad. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just stick to Iowa. That's manageable. And then I was like, okay, well, I will do the Iowa State Fair pie competition. And I thought that isn't really enough. It wasn't speaking to me fully. And then I thought, I'll do the pies of Ragbri, that bike ride that goes 500 miles across the state. And I was like, that isn't quite enough either. And then Ray Gun, the company, the t-shirt company in Iowa, Ray Gun, they had a postcard. I think it's also on a shirt. It's called The Faces of Iowa. And it's just got these little funny Fryowa, Spyowa, blah, blah, blah. And then one of them is Apple PIEOWA. And I always loved that. And I was like, PIEOWA, that's it. I'll do PIEOWA. And it'll encompass the State Fair, Ragbri, and all the other pie shops I mentioned before. So that's how that came about. I was like, PIEOWA, yeah. So I have Ray Gun to thank, and I said, hey, can I use the name? And they said, of course. And they go, hey, you want to use the logo too? And so they gave me the artwork, and then the whole project was born. And then I just started talking to a gazillion people, journalists, filmmakers, and then this guy that's like the head of video for the Des Moines Area Community College. He's now retired, so he had time. He had time to spend on the phone with me, and then he's been on speed dial ever since. So I've called him numerous times to help, when I've come up against a wall with something, and called him crying really hard one day too, because some of my footage was overexposed from one of the first camera people I hired, and you can't go back and redo it. It was Ragbri.
Even the AI can't fix that?
Maybe it can now, but at the time it was like, I had sent it over to another TV place, and they said, yeah, we can't do anything with this. And maybe that's changing, but anyway, I found workarounds, and I found other footage, and I shot a lot on my iPhone, amazingly. And then I sent that to the TV place, and they said, yeah, that looks good. So I'm like, okay, well, who needs to hire a camera crew? I'll just do the whole dang thing myself. And here's the other thing in Iowa, you can be so much more nimble with a phone than you can with a bigger camera. And also when you get around people like in these rural areas, like the church ladies, they don't like a camera in their face. But they don't mind the iPhone, because it's just, they're used to the
Everybody's
iPhone.
used to it.
Right. Yeah, so that was a lesson too. It's just like the comfort level of people speaking on camera, and yeah, lots of lessons learned.
I shouldn't digress, but I'm just thinking to myself, I know you wouldn't be the first person to film on your iPhone.
Yeah. But
now we're talking about your story about how it happened that you ended up filming a lot on your iPhone, and it's about pie, which is American. As they say, American is apple pie or whatever, and there's Apple, big company, and it's about pie, like Ted Lasso, which was apple. And so wouldn't they
Steve,
be?
that's a great idea, because I'm actually looking for funding right now because, I did have an initial grant, or actually it was a private donation. And I just, every step of the way on this project, I just feel like, God, the universe has my back or something. People have been unbelievably generous, excited, and just wanting to help. I don't think I've ever done anything quite this powerful to me, and that I've seen this huge support. It's just been, I pinch myself sometimes. I'm like, and every time I need something, somehow miraculously it seems to show up. So funding, yes. So I got some initial funding, and now I'll need more to do the final steps. Like, the cost of editing is pretty much the highest cost. I can edit a little bit. I've learned how to use Adobe Premiere Pro. I edited a promotional reel, so it's been fun to have like a 2.5-minute reel that, sort of highlights some of the things that I can finally show some footage to people and like show that there's some semblance of a story. And but I had to hire an editor to help fine tune the audio and the picture and all that stuff. So yeah, that's where the expense comes in. So I'll need some money for that. And then I don't know where it's going to air yet, but I'm working on that too. So.
Okay, so if people want to see that sizzle reel,
Yeah.
where can they find that?
So that's on, I went ahead and put it on YouTube because it was just easier to direct people there. So my YouTube page is The World Needs More Pie. And on that page on YouTube is PIEOWA sizzle reel, I think it says on there. So PIEOWA promo reel, but it's on my page.
And warning to everyone that make sure you don't watch it if you're hungry. B, make certain that you have some Kleenex handy.
Aw.
Because it is, I'm getting choked up right
Really?
now thinking about it. Yeah, it's so moving, and it has so much power that I just I can't wait to see what's going to come out of this, because it's, how can something like that be so visceral for people?
I can tell you in one word, it's love. That's what I learned. And now I'm going to get choked up. Because from the very first interview to the very last interview, and people that I would never have expected this to come from, people cried on camera when I asked them, why is pie important to you? Or how do you think pie can make the world a better place? And people just got choked up. And I actually did one interview on camera. I don't think I'm going to be in the film, but the one interview that I did, I also cried on camera. I'm like, what is going on with this subject matter? But it's memory, it's nostalgia, it connects us with our past, somebody we lost that we loved. Like my dad and I had this relationship over pie. Banana cream pie was his favorite. This chef in Des Moines that I interviewed, his mom was a really good pie maker, and he just almost doesn't want to make pie because he can't make it as good as her. And he just like starts talking about her, and it's just this emotional thing, cathartic too in a way. But I mean, I don't want to like name names, but we even interviewed a big magazine editor, and she's very polished, and then she starts crying on camera. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people who cried when they talked about pie, and it's like, this is what's going on here,
The Kleenex.
right? But I feel a big responsibility because of that this film better be good, because I want to serve the subject well. I want to honor the people who've been so open with me on camera about their feelings and their memories, and and I think there's just something about pie that represents I don't know, what we consider a simpler time, not necessarily a better time, mind you, I get that, but when things weren't so fast, things we could slow down a little bit. And I interviewed a 95-year-old woman, and she talked about taking the time. It's time. It's time and it's love. Those are like the two main takeaways, because a lot of people talked about how they don't have time to make pie anymore. So they just make bars or cookies. But people still really love pie. And I think what is so special about pie is that they know that you took that extra time, and time equals love. I think that's it. It's and it doesn't take that much time if you just, if you make as many pies as I do. It's like I'm pretty quick these days, but it's also, I love making pie because it's meditative. It slows me down when I'm all angst-ridden about something. I can be in a foul mood and I get my hands in the dough and I'm just like, it's even better than exercise. Like sometimes I get on the spinning bike, but other times I get my hands in the dough and it's just like, oh, I feel better after making something. And it's because I'm making something to share with somebody else. And that's the other really rewarding part about pie is you don't make it for yourself, you make it to share it generally. I mean, ideally, that's my message too, is about generosity and thinking of others and also making something for somebody who might need some cheering up or some support. And, my whole backstory was I lost my husband in 2009 unexpectedly, and it was baking pie that helped me heal. And then baking pie and giving it away and seeing how it made other people happy. And then that in turn made me happy. And it also just made me realize I could do something as simple as make a pie and give it away. And that would, that was a win-win. So easy.
I think there's another element too, and you mentioned it a couple of times. You mentioned the word hands. And it's because you're actually, utilizing your hands to make that dish. I mean, pie is best made with your hands. Yeah, you can put it in a Cuisinart.
Some people argue that, don't touch it with your hands, that'll make the dough tough. I go, that's a myth.
And not only that, we'd be missing that, what I'll call very simply just a transference of energy, where I remember I've talked to you about our friend who's a bread baker in Mount Vernon. And the way I fell in love with his pizza for the first time was by watching his hands, how he handled the dough, and realizing they had this relationship with that dough. And I wanted to eat it. I wanted to be a part of that relationship. It was someone who was taking the time to work with that dough, which is a living entity too.
Right.
And we get to share in that. So it's not simply just sharing in a delicious sweet or something like that, but it's actually sharing on a very human level, with the person behind that whole process.
Yeah, no, that's a good point because you're right. I do use my hands, and that was what originally got me into pie making is I had that .com job in San Francisco during the height of the boom, that whole internet boom back around the year 2000. And I just said, I don't want to create virtual worlds. This just makes me want to go work with my hands, something that engages my senses. And that's when I ended up getting a pie baking job in Malibu. It's like my only qualification was that, hey, I'm from Iowa. And they hired me, right?
They like pie there.
So that was my, first immersion with pie and seeing how it was healing in a different way and just being able to connect with our food and that hand thing. And I was so lucky because that place in Malibu, my mentor, Mary Spellman, she didn't use a food processor. She used her hands to make the dough. So I really got the crash course from her, and that was the best thing ever. That's just what I needed, and everything was done by hand, and I so fully subscribe to that. And I do not own a food processor. I do not even like hearing the words, and every time I read a recipe that says put your flour and butter in the food processor, I'm like, no, don't do it. I mean, just think of those metal blades cutting into, it's like evil, it's like, I'd rather use my hands. And that's the part where it's the transference of energy, yes, but the magic goes both ways. Like I get the energy comes back to me through that touching that, like that sensation. It's just, look at me. I just can't stop rubbing my hands because it's just something that feels so good. And that's very healing and nurturing somehow.
And that's the thing that I'll go again back to where you're talking about time. A lot of us approach not just making pie that way, that we don't have the time, but we don't have the time to even eat. we can't seem to find that time unless we're standing up or we're in the car or we're at our desk or anything like that. So we lose that connection, and it becomes more of a mechanical process instead of a process of nurturing. And so perhaps that's one of the things that, because of that collective memory and also individual memory that you were talking about, relation to pie, it can rekindle those things for people.
Well, as I said, one of the questions I asked everybody was, how do you think pie can make the world a better place? And I heard more than once, at least 5 times, sit down, maybe 10 times. I mean, seriously, I heard this over and over again. Take the time to sit down and have a slice of pie and a cup of coffee and a conversation. That's it. Full stop. That's how we can make the world a better place. Seriously, sit down, slow down. Pie and coffee, conversation. And you know, the other thing that was so refreshing about working on this film is politics did not ever come up. It was like, I don't know what anybody's political beliefs were. I don't know. And I'm glad I didn't want to know, because this was like this one neutral territory that we still have that's sacred. And I think that is extremely powerful in this time in our world, you know, that we can all agree on pie, right? So it's that one thing where you can come together and just have some peace around it. So yeah, world peace got the title, right? But PIECE, but you know, so I'm still on this mission to get people that just, can't we all just get along? And maybe we just make pie and share it with each other, sit down, put all the other stuff aside and just enjoy each other's company. And, you know, and I'm not the only one saying that. Every interview, I mean, so many people repeated that again and again. So I know I'm on to something because, but we need to maybe be reminded, hey, so maybe this film will be a reminder to people, hey, you know what? This is a good time to reach out to somebody that maybe you're estranged with and bake a pie and, you know, invite them in and just build some bridges, repair some of the divisions. And yeah, I do think pie can do that.
So personally, how would you express, we'll say, the transformation that you've experienced through this project from being at a point where you were kind of, you know, I don't know what I want to do. I'm not really thrilled. And now so full of passion and enthusiasm.
I think the passion started building right away from those first shoots that we did. From the very, very first shoot, when the guy cried on camera, I'm like, and then we did 2 interviews that day, and the second person also cried on camera, talking about his pie memories. And I knew from the very first day of shooting that I was dealing with something powerful and that I had a responsibility to tell these stories in a way that was meaningful and, you know, valuable and, you know, and do a damn good job with this. And, you know, it's funny because coming off of World Peace, where I had to dig pretty deep to find the good stuff, because so much bad stuff happened when I was traveling. You know, I took pies to a refugee camp in Lebanon, and it was a Syrian refugee camp, and a fight broke out when we were there. And here I was trying to deliver pies to bring peace, and then these guys are just, you know, we had to leave urgently because we were in the middle of like clubs and sticks, and then after I left Thailand at the Grand Hyatt Erawan, right next door is an Erawan shrine, and somebody bombed the shrine and some people were killed. And that happened, you know, during my trip around the world. There were just so many things that were so hard and overwhelming. And then there was the migrant crisis in Hungary. And I mean, the list was so long, I came back really discouraged. And I have to say, working on this particular film has brought all, like, I don't know, it's filled me back up again with hope and a sense that we're not completely, I was going to just use the swear word, but I won't.
Please don't.
We're not completely.
We don't want to edit.
we're maybe there's hope for us.
Your enthusiasm obviously is infectious. So that is one thing that people can hear when they're listening to this, or they can see if they're watching this. And so in the process where you're at right now, you have to take on this challenge of editing this film. Now, you've cut down your entire, whatever the volume of material that you had. You've gotten pared down to a certain point now where you think you've got like the guts of it ready to go, but you're not certain yet how that's going to evolve into, we'll call it the story, right?
Well, so this keeps me awake at night, but my filmmaker friends and everything I've read, not everything I've read, there's different schools of thought, but my one main person who I rely on, this friend, the friend who I shot the original Pie thing with in California back in 2010, her name's Janice, and she just wrote me this morning and said, just take it one little segment at a time. The story will become clear to you as you start piecing it together, and you'll move things around, and it'll unfold. And that's true in writing books also. I mean, sometimes it tells you what it wants to be instead of the other way around. You kind of start off with kind of like with books, I always start off with the table of contents, but there's still room for lots of meandering in that. And so I haven't started the meandering process yet, and I'm scared that it's going to be overwhelming and daunting and all that, but I think I just need to just start doing it. So after today, after this weekend, I'm going to lock myself back in my office and not come out again until I have this thing done. That's my goal.
But then there's no one we have to drop pies off at your house or something?
Yeah, well, I get dinner breaks.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
That's good.
But I often just work in my pajamas all day. That's a productive day for me. I'm like, if I start early and I don't get dressed, I'm like, then if I'm into it, it might be 6 o'clock and I'm still in my pajamas, but by God, it's been a productive day.
So that's how your creative process is then. How would you characterize it then?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's just show up. You gotta show up and turn on the computer and log into that Adobe Premiere Pro and open up the project and just start tinkering around. And then the next thing you know, oh my God, 5 hours have gone by, So those are good days. Yeah. And just sometimes I get sidetracked and I'll go off looking for a picture, or I go off looking for stock footage or something. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was a lot of time, but maybe it's productive, maybe not. I don't know. When I've written books, I could spend a half hour looking for one word, which seems so ridiculous, but that's the process.
But then when you find it.
Well, or whatever. It's maybe your mind is doing other things while you're looking for one word. I don't know how that works, but I'm just gonna hope that the universe has had my back on this whole thing is gonna still be there. I think my little muses are up there somewhere. They're gonna show up and they're gonna be at my desk with me. I'm really hoping.
Right, and I also want you to share, because I think it's so fascinating, some of the things that you've discovered by learning about this editing process that are only now, we'll say, becoming more well known to filmmakers in terms of what our ongoing technological progress allows. And I was fascinated when you were talking about how you can, you have the transcript, for example, of what the audio of somebody that you interviewed. And if you want to actually go to that, well, I'll let you explain it. It's extraordinary.
Well, so I was just thinking, wouldn't it be great, since Adobe Premiere, it will make transcripts for you. It automatically transcribes your text from your audio. I mean, wouldn't that be great if you could just highlight the text you wanted? Because I'm a writer, I come from that space. Like, I want to just cut and paste the words. Wouldn't that be great? Well, guess what? It's very new. Most editors I've talked to don't use it because it's so new. But I was like, oh my God, I discovered it on my own. And you can highlight the sound bite you want, the quote, whatever, and then you right click and then it drops it right into the timeline, the audio and video.
And video together.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like,
it's so amazing. Right. It's like it's a lifesaver for me because I know that I want the words, like I can always go back and fill in the pictures, but I need those words. And instead of having to like move the video around, go forward, backward, to get exactly the right place, it's like, nope, boom, in. It's a time saver. So that's been a huge thing. And then I just have had my hackles have been up about AI. Mm-hmm. But then I worked with this editor on the promotional reel, and he showed me some AI tricks that I was like, oh, well, okay, maybe in some cases I'm a huge believer now, because he was able to fix some of the audio, because we had like on Ragbri, there's, oh my God, the crowd noise in the background when you're trying to talk to somebody. And he was able to clean out a lot of that background noise. There was another program that syncs up when you have a separate audio file from the video file. There's a program that syncs up the sound to the lips. Just, you don't have to do it by visually looking. It does it. And then there was this other part where we put some vertical images into the promo reel, but we wanted everything to be horizontal. So this AI program fills in the missing background. So traditionally you'd have the vertical image and then you'd have like a blurred version of it on either side. So it fills the frame. So you don't have black on either side. But this way, it puts stuff in there, like it finds, I don't know how it works, but it'll actually fill in the rest of the kitchen. And there was one image where we could have had a white stove or a stainless steel stove or, oven door or whatever. And that was amazing.
Though there are some other fun things that you discovered while you were doing that, because you were talking about how you were in this one situation and it filled it in with...
Oh, yeah. You could actually change somebody's face. Mm-hmm. Like there was a picture, I'm posing in front of the American Gothic House with this person who I didn't want in the film. He's a celebrity, mind you, but just not somebody that represents pie. And so I was like, can we edit, I just would like to cut him out of here. So I wish it wasn't him or something like that. And he goes, oh, we can change it. So he starts filling in AI heads, male heads. And he said, they're not even real people.
Right.
That was
which brings up lots of which brings up some of the points that you were mentioning about how maybe there's a little bit discomfort with AI.
That was a big discomfort.
Right.
I'm like, that they looked like real people to me, and maybe they do resemble somebody out there in the world. There's 8 billion people, and somebody must look like that. But that was weird. And we didn't end up using that shot, so happily.
And there was another one I thought that was really funny, was that it filled it in when you asked it to expand the shot because you were missing the sides. It filled it in with trash or something like that.
Yeah, so it was during Ragbri, and this woman was set up, and it looked like an alley. It was probably just like a auto mechanic's garage or something like that. It was a brick building and a white garage door behind her, and she was holding this box of pies, and she's so adorable, and I just really loved that shot. And so AI was going to fill in the sides of this vertical shot, and it was putting trash and garbage cans, and it was like litter. I was like, no! And we had to keep trying, and then finally the editor just made her a silhouette and then put a whole park scene behind her, and we didn't end up using that shot either. There was some stuff where I was like, no, that just doesn't work. So, yeah, that was funny, though.
But it's fun.
Oh, it's been a blast, honestly, to be like just learning. And so I was out in California in January, and I was with my friend Janice at her house and her partner and her wife actually, and Janice and I start talking about all these technical terms about my documentary. And Marguerite was just sitting there going, listen to you two. And I go, I know, listen to me. I can't believe these terms, that I know these things now, these numbers and technical things and shots. And I was just going, God, I've learned so much. It's amazing.
What I want to explore for just a couple minutes right now is just the fact that you're fearless, basically, when it comes to taking on a challenge, if it's something that you have passion about. And there are literally millions of people out there who are passionate about different things and will say, don't think. Their mindset is such that, I could never do that. And yet they could. They have the ability, but there's something, whatever it is, that they have inside them that doesn't allow them to think that they can accomplish those things. And I know that as much as you talk about pie and are inspired and inspire people about pie, that because of all the things that you've done yourself, like learning how to make a film, a documentary film, for example, help us.
Oh,
What can we do?
Okay, so I'll use a pieism for that. Because you know how I always preach pie is not about perfection. People are afraid to make pie. So it's just a metaphor for the same thing we're talking about on a smaller scale. People are afraid about making crust because they haven't made it. Oh, it never turns out. Oh, my crust is terrible. And so I'm just like, well, it's supposed to look homemade. It should look homemade. It doesn't, you don't want it to look like it came from a bakery, that it was so perfect. It's like I want to be able to see that there's something maybe irregular about it. And so don't worry about it. And then, don't follow the rules exactly. It tells you how you can only put so much water in. It's like, I go, you know what? Relax about the water. Put as much water as you need for it to hold together. Less water might make a lighter crust, but it's going to be hard to roll it out and it's going to make you frustrated. So just put a little extra water. It's fine. No one's going to care. And nobody cares. They just love that it's homemade. And I would say on the other front of just like taking on new learning things, I went to a college in Olympia, Washington, the Evergreen State College, and it's an alternative school where it was less classroom based and more sort of learn by doing. And I think that's where a lot of my sort of basic stuff came from, is just go figure it out. And it doesn't have to be perfect. So there's the pie crust thing again. Doesn't have to be perfect. And that's just it. Like, I watched a TEDx talk. There was a filmmaker, and this only pertains to my film, obviously, but it's just the idea. This filmmaker was talking about how she made her documentary film, and she said, well, you just do the next thing. So you don't have to know exactly where you're going. You don't need to know the end point. You just need to start. And, with this film, it's like I could have overthought it. I could have planned, taken all this time to put together a budget and go to film school, whatever. And I was like, go just start, that's how you're going to learn. Just throw yourself into it. And like you did at college and like everything else you've done and just do the next thing. So, okay. Well, also Ragbri had a fixed date, so did the state fair. I'm like, well, you better hurry up then, because if you're going to get Ragbri this year on the 50th anniversary, you better, step it up. So I didn't have time to overthink it or worry about how it was going to go. I just started asking a ton of questions of people. I was Googling everything I could on the internet. I was looking at books, listening to podcasts, everything, just sponge, and I had a goal. And it's like, well, how do I achieve that? And, it doesn't have to be perfect. And there's other people to help you along the way. That's the key. It's not all on you anyway. If you don't know how to do it, you just ask somebody for help. People are happy to help. People have been so helpful. I cannot even tell you. I'm so grateful for all the guidance I've had on this project. And, the information is out there.
I want to give you another, just a little personal experience related to some of the things that you said, and that is that you feel more hopeful, right? And I think the more I come across people and develop some type of relationship, maybe it's just a very chance encounter, the more optimistic I become. And just recently, we'll say a couple months ago, my wife and I had a few experiences. One, somewhat like yours, that you're talking about in Greece with your suitcase, where we must have looked, we were in London, it was late at night, we had our luggage, and we must have looked like we had no clue as to where we were, which we didn't. And this couple came up to us, just walked up to us and said, can we help you? Now, they happened to live in London, but they were actually Turkish. And they just picked up our stuff and guided us to where we needed to go. And it was awesome and inspiring. And it was just an example of what happens if you, and this is where I think the big difference is, if you allow yourself to be open to experiences. And so when I think about pie, I think about warmth and I think about human connection. And that means that to make that happen, you have to be open. You have to be willing to share part of yourself with other people. And that then creates the bonds that really make us just smile from the inside, I think, and make us feel like, I need another piece of pie, which I kind of do right now, actually.
And you're lucky you have more pie upstairs.
We don't know, because we've been down here for almost an hour, and somebody could have eaten all the rest of that.
There's always going to be more pie. There's a law of abundance.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
It's been, oh my gosh, it's been so much fun. And I don't need to even say this, but all the best with the rest of this project, because I know it's going to be amazing, and I know I'm going to need, oh my gosh. I got to stop
You'll
talking.
be fine. See, I haven't interviewed you for the documentary yet, but you'll be one of those crying on camera.
Oh my gosh.
I cried too. It's all right.
Oh, thank you. Beth Howard, who's working on, is it going to be called PIEOWA?
Yeah, it's PIEOWA.
Okay.
Yeah, PIEOWA,
Yeah.
A Piece of America.
Yeah. Or, what does this say? Is this heaven?
No, it's PIEOWA.
Right. You've been listening or watching Great Taste, 60 Minutes of Deliciousness. I'm your host, Steve Boss.
Great taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.